Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Grocholsky, and I'm the founder and owner of a boutique consulting company called Empowered. And our mission at Empowered is to make inclusion, diversity, and belonging an innate part of how organizations operate and do business every day. And we also work with people within those organizations on how to make the most fair and equitable decisions. And given that you are probably calling in from a home office or from your home, I thought it would be fitting for me to share with you a photo of me in my home at a time definitely before I had kids, because the surfaces are clean and they're not covered in dinosaurs or construction paper or any of the other various toys and children's things that are currently covering my floor, as both of our kids are home with us these days. But wherever you're calling in from, firstly, thank you for taking the time to spend it with me and learning about this important topic. And also, I hope that this message finds you safe and well and healthy. So, with that, let's get started. There's a book that's been on my mind quite a lot lately, and I'm wondering if you can guess what it is. It has been called one of the most important books of the 20th century. It's also been recently named the New York Public Library's most checked out book of all time. That means more than How to Win Friends and Influence People, more than To Kill a Mockingbird, and even more than The Cat in the Hat. And can you believe it? This book is a picture book. Do you know what it is? It's this book, The Snowy Day by Ezra Jack Keats. And it's the story of a child who experiences snow for the very first time. And this is a book that I read to my son Gabriel every single night before he goes to bed. And to him, to our 2-year-old son, it doesn't matter that this book is almost 60 years old. It still does this magical thing of capturing the universal awe and wonder and appreciation that we feel when we experience something with an open mind. So, as book people, as publishers and booksellers and agents and editors, you might be familiar with this story. Peter is the main character. He lives in Brooklyn. He's a preschooler, like my son. He's too young to join the big kids in their snowball fight. And he has a big, big, big imagination and a bright red snowsuit. And Peter is Black. Do you know the backstory behind this book? Well, in 1962, Ezra Jack Keats looked around and he began to question the lack of visible diversity in children's literature. So Ezra was actually an illustrator himself, and he had drawn dozens of characters over the years, but none of them were Black. In fact, he noticed that very few books at the time featured any sort of racialized minority character. And if they did, they were usually in the background, rarely the focus, and even more rarely the protagonist. And so Ezra set out to change that. He was a Jewish American author and illustrator who decided to go first and to create Peter, who is the hero of his story. And when asked later about his decision to do this, to feature a Black child as the protagonist of his story, he said this. He said, "My book would have him there simply because he should have been there all along." Children loved this story. It didn't matter where they were from, if they were from Florida or if they were from Canada, or if they had ever even seen snow. They could read this book and they could share in this delight that Peter had as he ventured into these big, tall piles of snow without any of the fear that it was going to be too cold or too wet or too uncomfortable. He did not have any expectation or any preconception. Peter experienced snow with the open mindedness of a child. And teachers, well, they loved this book too. They wrote into Ezra saying, the kids in my class for the first time are using brown crayons to draw themselves. These are Black children who before your book drew themselves with pink crayons, but now they can see themselves. So through Peter, Ezra empowered children to put themselves into their own stories and also to see themselves as the hero in other people's stories. As my son asked me to read this book for what felt like the thousandth time one evening, he turned to me in only the way a child can and said, "Mom, Peter's skin is black." "Yes," I said. And he followed with, "And my skin is white." "That's right," I replied. And that was it. Just like that, my son did the very thing that I've been trying to do for my entire adult life, and certainly the thing that I would try to do or talk about with audiences like you. He noticed difference. He saw it, but he did not judge it. Instead, he looked upon it with interest and wonder and curiosity, just like how Peter looked at the snow, as any child would look upon the snow. Well, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be wonderful if, as we decided who to publish or hire or trust or mentor, we could approach our decisions with the very same open-mindedness as Peter? If we could see things and people for who they are, as opposed to who we expect or perceive them to be. Well, it turns out, as playwright and screenwriter Julia Jordan discovered, it is not that simple. For 7 years after graduating Juilliard, Julia wrote a ton of plays and she won some awards for some of them. And despite all of that hard work, she could not get a single one of her plays into production. And so she felt stuck. She looked around and her male classmates, they were working hard and their plays were getting picked up. And those plays were going onto the big stages that she had dreamed of, in front of the big audiences that she aspired to. And she saw that their networks were growing and growing, and all the while she felt stagnant. So she did the thing that many of us have either thought about doing or maybe we have actually done ourselves, which is to give up, to throw in the towel. Or in this case, she decided to throw in her pen. And she did that for 3 years. For 3 years, she waited tables as opposed to doing what she loves, which is writing. And she never once picked back up that pen to write. Until one day, a friend suggested that Julia take one of her plays and switch the sex of the protagonist from a male lead to a female. Sorry, from a female lead to a male lead. And she did that. And she even called it Boy. And guess what? She finally landed her big production. Boy is what Julia calls her most autobiographical piece ever. But it took changing the sex of the protagonist, which was her, in order for it to get picked up and supported and to finally reach the big stage. And here's the amazing thing. Julia did something about this. Having gone through this experience, she decided that once and for all, she had to uncover whether or not a person's sex or gender mattered. Did male playwrights have a greater chance of getting their plays produced than females? Or does having a male lead character increase the odds of getting your play onto a stage? So she found a great partner, a woman named Emily Sands from Harvard, who was a PhD student at the time. And together they dug into these questions by doing a bunch of experiments. And in one study, what Sands did was she took identical scripts and wrote on half of them the pen name Mary Walker. And on the other half, she wrote Michael Walker. And then she took these scripts, these identical scripts, that the only thing that was different was the name of the person who authored them. And she mailed them out across the country to theater directors and literary managers and asked them to evaluate the scripts. How good are these scripts, or how good will they be, on a number of different dimensions, including how much money they were going to make, how good of quality are they, and their anticipated success. And what they learned was quite surprising. They found evidence of a clear gender bias. So even though Mary and Michael's scripts were the exact same, Mary's was consistently rated as lower quality than Michael's. In fact, 15% lower quality. But that is concerning. But that's not even the most stunning part. What they found was that this bias only came into play when the directors and literary managers, who again were the ones who were reviewing the scripts, were women. That's right. Women reviewers were less likely to think that a woman's play would make money, or it would appeal to an audience, or that it would win awards or have likable characters. And what's more, they found that when the plays featured women or had a female lead, and these are the plays that are most commonly written by women, they're also much less likely to be produced. So what is going on here? Maybe your mind is going to this place of, are these women just not wanting one another to succeed? Is it that there's so few of them that they're guarding their territory against one another? Well, Julia and Emily, they say no. Instead, what they say is that the histories and the experiences of these female theater directors and literary managers help to explain why they might be unintentionally penalizing or are harsher on female writers. So because these female theater directors and literary managers have a greater awareness from their own experiences of being grossly underrepresented in the industry, of experiencing gender bias, of seeing the lion's share of their talented female counterparts and peers not make it, of seeing less plays produced by talented women writers, they assume that these plays are going to be less well received. Because of what they've seen and experienced themselves, their brains become much more inclined to believe that a male screenwriter will be successful. This is unconscious bias. We take what we have experienced, what we have learned from observing others, from listening to others, and we form these unseen connections in our brain. And the result is that we tend to prefer and place bets on people who are comfortable, the people who have been the most successful in the past. And we discount or overlook those who have not, even when they look like us. It's as if someone has laid tracks in our snow. They've left footprints, impressions, and stereotypes that muddy our perceptions and that influence our judgments. And most of the time, we don't even know it's happening. I've come to call this muddy snow. Muddy snow is what gets in the way of our ability to look upon others with the openness and wonder of Peter seeing snow for the first time. And muddy snow is what causes us to look at a play by a female or a gender non-binary screenwriter and decide that it is not as commercially viable. Muddy snow is why we might look at a potential Indigenous or racialized minority author and conclude that their book is just not marketable. Muddy snow is what gets in the way of our intention to be fair, objective, and inclusive. Our goal is to do what my son did. Our goal is to see difference, to see it, without judging it as good or bad. Our goal is to rewire our brains so that we can get better at seeing people for who they truly are, rather than falling back on these muddy snow stereotypes about such things as race and gender and ability or identity. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to spend the rest of today's talk delving into 6 questions that I've developed that can help us all on a daily basis with our decisions, whether they're hiring decisions or promotion decisions, editorial decisions, marketing decisions, so that we can see people with clean snow perceptions. So this is a resource that I have created and it's available to you right now. All you have to do is click on the link of this video and you'll automatically be presented with a PDF that you can download and print. You might want to push play on this webinar and do that now so that you have it to hand, because we're actually going to work through these questions together so that you're better equipped once you leave this webinar to make as inclusive and fair decisions as possible. Question 1. What do I know about this person? So I want you right now to think about a scenario that you have coming up at work where you're going to be making a decision about another person. Maybe it's whether to hire them or whether to promote this person, to buy their book, how to market their book, or how much money you're going to pour into their book. Any decision that you are going to make that relates to another person. Now take a moment and reflect. What do you know to be true about this person? Not people like them that you've encountered in the past, not what you've learned from similar others or stories about similar others, not what you assume, not what you expect. What are the facts that you know to be objectively and concretely true about this person? Let me give you an example. So let's say we're deciding whether or not to publish an author. Here's what we know about her. We know that this is her first book. We know she's a woman. We know that she's from Mexico and that she identifies as Latina, and she's 67 years old. Those are the 5 things we know about her. Now, before we move on to the next question, I encourage you to push pause and write down what you concretely know about the person that you're making the decision about, and then come back to us when you're ready. Question 2, what assumptions am I making? So this is the part where we start to get into our own muddy snow. So when in the earlier example, I said that the author was 67, where did your mind go? Honestly, what did you think about that? Maybe you thought that she was going to be unrelatable to your readers who are under 40. Or maybe you started to question whether or not she would be able to go on a media tour. Or maybe you doubt that she has a social media platform or a following. What came up in your mind when you heard that she was Latina or from Mexico? Maybe you thought, this won't be a mass media book. It's going to be niche for a Spanish-speaking audience. Or maybe you thought the quality of the writing is just not going to be up to the same standard as an author who has English as their first language, or maybe somebody who's published more books in the past. We can already see just how easy it is for us to take a very small amount of information, 5 pieces, and to jump to all kinds of conclusions about what this person can and cannot do, how good they are, how competent they are, how attractive they're going to be to other people. And we do this all within a matter of seconds. It is human and it is innate. But the truth is, as you know, we don't know any of this. All we know is that she's 67 and she's from Mexico and she's Latina. We don't know that she cannot be a social media influencer. And we certainly don't know any of the other conclusions that we've just drawn and gone through. So go back to your list now of what you know about the person that you're making a decision about. Be honest with yourself. What are the judgments that you've made about what this person can or cannot do? About how trustworthy, reliable, successful they'll be, about what their limitations are, why they won't work out. What assumptions have you made? Where does your mind go when you think about these aspects of the other person? Write them down and have the courage to be honest with yourself in doing so, because we cannot change something if we are not willing to honestly see it. This is your muddy snow. And there's good news. Not only can we change our muddy snow, and these questions are going to help us to do that, but there's also a tool that can help us to realize where we have these muddy snow perceptions that are going on that cause us to jump to conclusions about people and to have negative judgments about them without actually often being aware that we're doing it. So we're now going to jump in and do a sample of this tool. And I'd like you to think about Peter as you're going through it, to try to have the open mind of Peter, to explore and to discover a part of your brain that you might not be aware is operating in the way that it is. Not to judge it, but to simply jump in and to be open-minded about it. Because again, by being open-minded about the fact that our brains are making these connections, that we have muddy snow, we can move forward and do something about it. We can become more inclusive, and we can also encourage others to do the same. So in a moment, I am going to show you a word on the screen. And what I'd like you to do is to tell me as quickly as you can whether the word belongs in category A or category B. Category A is for words that are insects or unpleasant. And category B is for words that are flowers or pleasant. And what I want you to do is to go with your gut instinct. So the first response that comes to your mind, A or B, go with it. Don't overthink it, because again, what we're doing here is we're tapping into your unconscious mind. We don't want to be overly deliberate. This is a point where those of you who are highly thoughtful and conscientious, you're just going to want to put that aside and just go with your gut. Go with what your innate response is here when I flash these words up on the screen. If you're in a room right now with other people and you don't want to disturb them, or you don't want to have them overhear you, you might just want to push pause now. This activity will take about 4 or 5 minutes. You might want to go into another room, separate yourself, and then come back, because I'm going to ask you to please say your answers out loud. It's very important that you say these answers out loud, A or B. So you might want to push pause, remove yourself, find a quiet space, and then push play when you're ready to join us again. Okay, so let's try this. Again, category A for insects or unpleasant words, category B for flowers or pleasant words. Let's do a sample. Wasp, A or B? Say it out loud, the first answer that comes to your mind. Tulip, poison, rose, enjoy, grasshopper, pain, daffodil. Okay, that was our practice. So now we are going to change the categorizations. I would like you to say A out loud if the word relates to family or female, or say B if the word relates to career or male. So A if it's female or family, B if it's male or career. We're going to do a little sample together, and then we're going to get into the true task. And again, say it out loud as quickly as you can. Child, paycheck. Are you ready? Let's go for it. She, garden, office, he, laundry, children, job, him, profession, marriage, briefcase, woman, home, man, kitchen, manager, salary. All right. Thank you so much for participating. We're just going to do that one more time, but this time we're going to change the categorizations around. So now you will say A if the word is male or family, and you'll say B if the word is female or career. So A, male or family, B, female or career. It's the same words as before, so we won't do a practice. We're just going to get right into it. Let's go. She, garden, office, he, laundry, children, job, him, profession, marriage, briefcase, woman, home, man, kitchen, manager, salary. All right, take a breath. We're done. Which time did you think was easier? The first time when we paired female with family, or the second time when we paired female with career? Well, you've just run through a little demo of the implicit association test, which is Harvard's measure. It's the leading measure globally of unconscious bias. And what it assesses is the strength of associations in our mind by calculating how much time it takes us to categorize these words. So the stronger the association, or the more closely you link to things, the quicker you are to respond. The looser the association, the more time it takes. So that's why, if you're like the majority of us, over 76% of us, you found it easier and you found yourself to be much more decisive the first time around when we paired male with career and female with family. You've probably found it was much more efficient. And if we were together in a room as intended to be at this forum, you would have heard greater agreement between yourself and your colleagues in the room. Now, the second time around was different. You were grappling unconsciously with what you wanted to say as somebody who promotes gender equity, as someone who is a working woman in the workplace, or who has a loved one who is a working woman in the workplace, or who is a father who is loving to their child. You were grappling with what you wanted to say and the automatic connection that your brain made. And if we were doing this together in a room, what you would have heard is that you would have heard pauses. People would have taken longer to respond to say A or B. And you would have heard that people would have been kind of like changing their answer, like A, oh, B, I mean, B, oh, A. It's usually a very different situation the second time around. And that's because our collective wiring is such that it is easier for us to pair female with family and male with career. And it's not just gender and the workplace. These are some data points from other types of implicit association tests that tell us, and this has been validated globally with millions of people and across languages and countries, that we as people favor males in the workplace, that we favor white over Black people, people without disabilities, and thinner people. Now, the majority of us are good people who want to be fair. Very few of us wake up every day and want to discriminate against other people. And yet something is happening in our brains that is working in opposition to that. Well, this is our collective muddy snow. Within milliseconds, regardless of who you are, whether you're a woman or a man, whether you're a racialized minority or not, we can arrive at conclusions and make assumptions about people. And they're assumptions that we're often not even aware that we're making, just like those female literary managers and theater directors did in that earlier example. And we do this because we are bombarded with way too much information. You know, case in point, right now, your brain is receiving over 11 million pieces of information. How many of those pieces of information do you think you can consciously process at one time? 40. So that means that over 99.9996% of what your brain is processing in this moment is unconscious. The result is that we do not see people cleanly for who they really are. Instead, we evaluate them on the tracks that have been laid in our minds based on what we have seen in our own personal examples, what we've heard in the media, what we've learned in school or have experienced in the past. And I'm going to be completely honest with you here. I'm not talking to you from a place of, I don't do this, because I absolutely do it too. I am human. And to be human means that we all have muddy snow. So here's an example of my own. A number of years ago, I was taking an elevator up to attend a women in capital markets event. And the women in the room were managing or making millions upon billions of dollars, present company not included in that at all. Um, and I'm in this elevator, and this beautiful, young looking blonde squeezes into the elevator. And I'm looking at her. She's wearing heels and bright red lipstick, and she's got a fur coat. And the rest of us in this elevator, we're all in business suits. And I'm wearing pearls and my flat pumps. And I got to tell you, I am embarrassed to admit this. But you know what I thought as I looked upon this woman? Barbie. On some unconscious level, I thought, she is not going to this meeting, this Women in Capital Markets meeting of high powered women. She's probably here to shop, or maybe she's doing a spa getaway with her friends, or she's got something going on with her boyfriend. So you can absolutely imagine my surprise a number of hours later when this blonde woman who I had written off as a frivolous Barbie doll takes the stage as one of our speakers. It turns out that Barbie had over 15 years of experience of trading on Wall Street, and she's the co-founder of an institutional investment firm and is one of Canada's most trusted and sought after financial experts and speakers. So I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this brilliant woman speak, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm supposedly an expert on unconscious bias. I work in inclusion and diversity. And I just did it to her. I looked at her and I assumed that she could not be in this room, that she was frivolous. And rather than see her with an open mind like Peter, I was seeing muddy snow, seeing and judging her for who I expected her to be rather than for who she really was. But I'm glad that I saw that connection that my brain was making, because now when I see or I interview a youngish, well dressed blonde woman, I think to myself, give her a chance. I know I have to be deliberate because I'm aware of where my brain unconsciously goes. And it's not just Barbie. It's the Black man in the hooded sweatshirt who's walking down the road. It's the person with a disability who's applying for the job. It's the transgender author who's submitting their draft. We are unconsciously categorizing people, we're judging them, and we're making assumptions about them before we've even given them a chance. And we often don't know that we're doing it. So I encourage you to do the IAT. It's available for free at Harvard University's website. You can Google Project Implicit or IAT, and within a matter of minutes, you will find out who you have unconscious preferences for, which is going to help you. It's going to help you to proactively catch yourself before you operate on the basis of your assumptions. It is a way for you to get to know your own muddy snow stereotypes. You have to be willing to know what yours are if you are ever to do anything about it. So please do the IAT. Question 3, how can I attain a different perspective? So going back to our fictional example earlier of the Latina author, we made this assumption that she would not relate to the mass market. She's 67, she's Latina, she's from Mexico, and we questioned her stamina to even be able to withstand the demands of a media tour. We also suspected that maybe she lacks a digital presence, or maybe she doesn't have a following, and so she's not going to resonate as well with her readers. Well, what's a way that we could challenge this view? How could we bring in a different perspective or find counter evidence? Well, one very easy way that you can do, regardless of where you are, who you are, where you sit in the world, is to Google it. Maybe you've heard of this acronym, GTS. Google that stuff. Whatever assumption it is that you want to challenge, the chances are good that there is an example or a perspective on Google that is ready to help you to do just that. For example, one very quick keyword search of Mexican author in their 60s yielded a person that you are probably very familiar with as book people, Don Miguel Ruiz. He is the author of a number of different best-selling books, including, as you'll see here, with Queen O, The Four Agreements, which has been translated to over 46 languages worldwide. It's been on the New York Times bestseller list for over a decade, and it's also gone on to sell over 8.5 million copies in the United States alone. Don Miguel has over 192,000 followers on Instagram and 94.6 followers on Twitter. That's a lot, right? And he also has a touring schedule that, as a mid-30s person, I honestly do not think I could keep up with. I have no idea how he can do all that he does. This man is incredible. So right there, I didn't have to do much. I just put that into Google and I was presented with all kinds of evidence that counters my original assumption that this 60-something author is going to lack the stamina and the marketability and the social media presence and the commercial viability. Immediately at my fingertips, I see how wrong I am. Another way that you could do this is find out what the demand is for particular books, stories, and authors. So again, using this example, a Google search will tell us that there are thousands of blogs and Reddit feeds and posts about the need for more authentic stories of Latin culture told from authentic Latinx authors' voices. We now have tangible evidence and proof that can refute the assumption that we made that this author or this book will never sell. Because when we only look to find evidence of what has worked in the past, the kinds of people who've worked in the past, the kinds of people who tend to yield best-selling books, well, our biases, they're going to persist. We are going to keep doing what has always been done, what we believe will be successful, rather than give opportunity to new voices and to different stories. Don Miguel should not be an outlier. There should be many voices like his. And if all we do is replicate, then we operate from our muddy snow and nothing changes. And of course, there's many other ways to attain different perspectives, including asking people who have a different viewpoint or experience from yourself. Who's someone in your office that you typically don't go to as a bounce point for a brainstorm? Who's the person that you just don't consider? Maybe they have a totally different functional expertise than you, a different job title. Maybe they're from a totally different background, or they have been educated in a totally different way. Who is the person who you tend not to go to? That's a really good tip off as to who you should be tapping into and asking to provide you with a different viewpoint. The fact that they have so many differences is a real asset here that will help you to think about your situation and your decision from an entirely new perspective so that you can do things differently and be more objective. One of my clients has recently reached out to me because she's grappling with this whole new world of work right now in the midst of COVID-19. She was a leader who, for many, many years, did not want to hire somebody who was not co-located under the same roof as her. She just questioned, is somebody actually going to be working hard if they're at home? Are they going to be doing their laundry? Are they going to be, out multitasking and doing other things if they're not under my eye? And now with this global pandemic, all of a sudden, the dozens of employees who work for her are all working from home. And she tells me that she wishes she would have challenged her assumptions earlier. She has dozens of employees who wanted to work from home, who she could have talked to and asked them for their perspectives around why it was important and how they could make it work. She has industry peers and peers from other industries who she could have reached out to to say, how are you making it work? What's your perspective on why this is valuable? She could have challenged her own innate skepticism about this many months before she was forced to deal with this new reality. And the good news is her team is rising to the occasion. Everyone is performing really well. She's pleased, but she wishes that she had done this sooner, because in the midst of her own confirmation bias, surrounding herself with people who agreed with her that people needed to be under the same roof, she passed up and she lost a lot of really good people who could have had a massive impact. We are right now in the midst of totally re-examining our assumptions about work and about working virtually. And in so doing, we're coming head to head with our own biases and the biases of others. So it's a really good time to pause and to be mindful of what our assumptions are and to challenge them by inviting voices, evidence, and data that can counter our perspectives. So let's think again now about your own decision. Take a moment to consider, who are the people that you know, or maybe you don't know yet, maybe you need to find these people and reach out to them, who could help you to look at this decision from a totally different vantage point. What data or benchmarks could you find, or could you ask others to help you find, that could paint a different picture? What evidence could you gather, whether it's on Google, which is quick and easy and at your fingertips, or from a colleague or an industry peer, that could lead you to draw an entirely different conclusion? What are you going to do to challenge your viewpoint about this person before you make a decision? You might want to push pause now, jot down your responses, and then we will come back together on question 4. Question 4, how can I be more specific? Well, a few years ago, an executive I worked with shared with me that he questioned whether or not his female direct report has what it took to be promoted into a sales leadership position, because she lacked the requisite leadership presence. So I asked him, what do you mean by leadership presence? And he responded, commanding the room, being charismatic, energetic, extroverted, talkative. So I asked him, what tells you that those traits are important? And he tells me, our past sales leaders. They were all loud, boisterous types who never found a silence that they couldn't fill. And I thought that was interesting. So I asked him, how do you know that it was those specific traits that led to their success in this role? And he said, well, I just assumed. Assumed. Well, I asked him, are you an extrovert? He said, no, I'm definitely an introvert. And honestly, I find it hard because the teams typically come to conclusions that they all agree on. They're typically in alignment and their styles are all the same. I often find that I'm an outlier, that I'm the one who's thinking about and processing and communicating things in a different way, feel often very alone. So by unpacking the word leadership presence, we together got clear that this leader was unconsciously pattern matching on the basis of extroversion. So he was hiring people and promoting people on this image of other people who've been successful. And he's doing that because he wants to reduce the likelihood of making a bad decision. We believe that if we just look to the past and do what we've always done, then we are going to reduce the likelihood that the person will fail, right? Look to the past and it will help you to predict the future. But by doing that, all he was doing was to continue to get what he's got, a bunch of extroverts, which is not a bad thing, but what it's led to in his circumstance is groupthink, less robust decision making, less robust discussions. He often feels alone. If he had more diversity of style, he in fact could have a stronger performing team, more innovative ideas, more robust decisions and discussions. So anytime you hear these descriptors that are being used, leadership presence, confidence, culture fit, I'm sure you can think of your own in your own organization. Pause and ask yourself, what do we specifically mean by this word? What are we actually measuring here? And How sure are we that they have to be this way in order to be successful? Because the chances are what you're doing is you're pattern matching yourself. You're conjuring up an image of somebody who's exemplified those traits in the past and unconsciously expecting other people to mirror it in the same way that the other person demonstrated it. And just like in my example of that leader, we continue to do what we've always done. And so we continue to get what we've got. Sameness. Here's another example. You're probably familiar with this one. In the 1970s, orchestras came under fire for the lack of gender diversity of their musicians. And it was mind-boggling because here were all of these women who were auditioning, and yet there was a lack of those who were making it into orchestras. So what they did was they actually instituted blind auditions. They put candidates behind a thick black curtain which masked their identity. And they even put out thick carpets so people couldn't hear their footsteps and if they were wearing heels or not. And all of that was done so that the people listening could not tell what the sex was of the musician. The researchers found that blind auditioning increased the likelihood of a woman being accepted past the first round by 50% and being hired to the symphony by 33%. These women were always talented. They were always good at what they were doing, but it took removing from consideration their sex in order for the listeners to objectively hear it. When we get specific about what information we will and will not consider, we make it more likely that we will be fair in our decision making. And the research has borne this out. We know that unconscious bias runs rampant when we are ambiguous, when we are vague and unclear about what we are looking for and what we are not going to consider. So what is the information that could bias the decisions that you make? Maybe it's a candidate's name or their year of graduation or their gender identity. Be specific about the information that you will consider and what you won't. And the information that you won't, remove it from your consideration. Maybe you omit it from resumes or from book proposals. There's probably a myriad of ways that you can take this information out of your view so that your unconscious does not operate without your intention, causing you to favor certain people and disfavor others. And equally, get specific about what you are going to consider. So going back to that fictional example of that 60-year-old Latina author, what are the criteria on which we will make our decision about whether or not to publish her? We know that her culture, her age, her gender, her ethnicity are not reliable indicators because when we did the GTS thing, we found that there are examples of successful authors like her, probably not enough, but there are examples, and there is a demand for stories like hers. So it might feel uncomfortable for us and risky publishing people who are like her, but that's not because they won't be successful. It's not because they don't have what it takes. It just means that we're uncomfortable because we don't have enough exposure. We don't have enough familiarity. And that discomfort is an indication that there is a gap that needs to be filled. We are uncomfortable because there's not enough. We need more authors and we need more stories like hers. So what are the concrete criteria on which you will make an objective publishing decision? The same kind of criteria that you're going to apply to any book, any author, regardless of whether or not you're comfortable with them, whether or not you've ever had exposure to someone like them. Because most of us we want to believe that our decisions are based on fact, that the person we publish is most deserving, or the person that we develop or mentor or hire has the most objective potential or talent. But the reality is, as you've learned today, our decision making can be as influenced by our instinctive feelings and our unconscious mind as by our rational thought process. So we must put steps in our process to ensure that we are being as specific and concrete as possible and that we're making decisions that are based on fact and not fiction. So let's go back to your own decision. What are the objective, tangible requirements that this person must perform? How are you going to make the decision? What are the criteria that you are going to make that decision against? What are the data points that you need to consider? What are the data points that you will not consider, that you are going to remove from your view so that your unconscious mind doesn't pick them up and lead you to operate on bias or muddy snow? And what do you specifically mean when you say certain things like their book is going to be too niche to be successful? Push pause and come back to us when you're ready. Author James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." Do you remember those female literary managers and theater directors? Just imagine for a minute how uncomfortable it was for them to learn that they had been evaluating women's scripts more harshly than men's, thinking that women had lower quality scripts or that they'd be less successful. Remember how you felt when you did that activity, grouping men and career and women and family, and how you might have felt if it was easier for you to put men with career. It is not easy confronting the reality that our brains are working in a way that, for many of us, does not line up with our intentions. But it is essential that we do confront it because, as I've mentioned earlier, unless we do, nothing will change. So this question, question 5, could this be muddy snow, is all about having the courage to ask yourself, and just as importantly, ask those around you whether or not you might be operating with a bias. Preferring those who are familiar and similar over those who are different. Making assumptions that lead you to judge some people more harshly than others or to not give them a chance. Seeing someone not for who they are as a person, but rather for the people who've come before them, for the footprints that other people have left in the snow. We must all have the courage to face the fact that we operate with this muddy snow. So this is the question that I want you to come back to when you're sitting around a boardroom table and you're hearing someone say that an LGBTQ plus novel, romance novel, is never going to sell, or how brown books with brown characters or brown authors are going to be too niche, or how there are just not enough qualified people with disabilities to hire. This is the question you ask in the moment that you think or you suspect that a bias could be at play. Could this be muddy snow? When we ask with openness and curiosity, well, this question allows us to be like Peter, to have an open, honest, and quite frankly, just a receptive examination of whether there's something that's going on that we might not be aware of. It puts the focus on the problem, the bias, and not on the person, because as I'm hoping you've seen today, all of us operate with an unconscious inclination to favor certain people over others. We don't know that we're doing it, but that doesn't mean that it's okay for us to continue to operate under their influence. We must break ourselves out of it. And the way to do that is to move what's unconscious into our conscious mind. So you could ask this question and the answer could be no. Maybe you're looking at this situation objectively, but still the question is worth asking because it takes you again out of autopilot and it's a springboard for you to go back through the previous questions that we've covered and work through them together with others to identify whether or not you're making assumptions or whether there is a particular bias or muddy snow that's at play. So take a moment now and go through your previous responses to your previous questions and ask yourself, could this be muddy snow? Is the way that you're perceiving and evaluating this person clean and objective? Or are there other people's footprints muddying your perspective? What is the muddy snow that you need to be aware of to make the best, most inclusive decision possible? Go ahead and do that now and join us when you're ready. And finally, question 6 to make more inclusive decisions. How can I be like Peter? How can I see this situation, this person, with an open mind and a sense of curiosity to learn about them? to explore. How can I see this situation and this person from a fresh perspective and not with the muddy footprints of the other people I've learned about or heard or experienced in the past? How can I see what really is in this moment as opposed to what I expect or what I perceive it to be? And how could we all be more like my son Gabriel, and perhaps like the children that you have in your life too, noticing differences, whether they're skin color, abilities, gender identity, religion, politics, socioeconomic status, age, indigeneity, and not judging them as good or bad or better or worse. I want you to give some thought to what you can do to be your most open-minded, curious, and clear-eyed self, and how you can remember to look upon others and one another with the eyes and the mind of Peter. Perhaps you keep a copy of this book at your desk at work, or you share this talk and print out with your colleagues so that this book can serve as a tangible reminder, a talisman, reminding you all to make fair, balanced decisions that will serve all involved. And to remind you and your entire team that each one of us has an opportunity every day to be more of the kind of person that we all want to be, which is fair, with an open mind like Peter. So go back through your questions. Where is there opportunity for you to shift your viewpoint, to look at this differently from the vantage point of someone like Peter, open-minded, with a fresh perspective? How does that shift the way that you approach the decision that you're going to make? How will you make a decision like Peter? I plucked The Snowy Day again from our bookshelf the other night. And as I was doing that, I couldn't help but thank Ezra Jack Keats, the author of A Snowy Day, for teaching us about how we can see beyond the limits of what is to what can and what should be. For showing us at a time when there was very little diversity in publishing that a Black child named Peter could and absolutely should be the hero of our story. For enabling children and people around the world to see themselves or people who are different like them reflected back. For empowering all of us to pick up a different color pencil. And as I hope you felt today, inspiring us to see with a fresh perspective, with an open mind that allows us to see people and their differences as they actually are, rather than as we expect them to be. Because it often takes us seeing something different to be able to do something different. Our decision to see something different, to question the instinctive, innate connections that our brains make and to change them, makes it possible for others to do it too. So we must go first, just like Ezra did. This talk has been an invitation for you to begin to see, question, and change the unconscious associations that dictate who we hire, who we promote, listen to, and that also shape which stories get told and who gets to tell them. To start to question why it is that we feel more comfortable with stories and people who conform to our expectations, who, like those female theater directors and literary managers, fit the bill of who's been successful in the past. This is an invitation to pick up a different color pencil and to question why we ever picked up a select few to begin with. As I look at my son, Gabriel, looking upon Peter, a curious and fun-loving child, just like himself, the hero of the story, experiencing the magic of childhood, I am reminded that this is the way that we at one time looked upon one another. We saw each other for who we really are, with openness, appreciation, and wonder. And we have the capacity to do that again. It has been a sincere honor and privilege to share the last hour with you. I welcome any thoughts, questions, ideas, perspectives that you might have. And once again, I hope that this webinar finds you and your families and those around you well, safe, and healthy. Thank you so much. Be well.